Most nights, I pour drinks, clear tables, and try not to make eye contact with anyone who smells like trouble. Brooklyn doesn't notice girls like me, and that's exactly how I've survived. Rena's bistro isn't much. A red awning faded from sun and time, cracked tile floors, walls the color of old wine labels. But it's clean. The tips are decent. And no one asks too many questions if I keep my sleeves down and my voice low. I take the late shifts. The ones no one wants. I refill glasses, dodge wandering hands, and keep the regulars smiling just enough not to get mean. I don't flirt. I don't linger. I stay invisible because invisibility is cheaper than body armor. The only real kindness in my routine comes from Rosa, the head cook who's worked here since the 80s. She says I remind her of her daughter. I think she just sees a girl who never asks for anything. We all need our myths. Rent's due in 5 days. My savings account has $147 in it. And I've been putting off a dentist appointment for 2 months because it's a choice between that and groceries. Life teaches you how to prioritize. Mine taught me to disappear before I become a target. Friday night, I'm already late for my shift when I push open the back door. The rain's coming down sideways, soaking through my hood. My left eye is almost swollen shut, the cut on my cheek stings every time I blink, and dried blood crusts beneath my ear. No one says anything when I step inside. Not yet. You look like hell, Rosa says from behind the prep line, eyes narrowing. I'm fine, I lie, setting down my bag. You're not, a voice answers behind me. Deep. Cold. Controlled like a match waiting for gasoline. Marco Marino. He steps into view in a black jacket, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, eyes trained on my face like they're reading something no one else can see. And then he moves closer. Gently touches my jaw. Who did this to you? It's not a question. It's a loaded gun. I should lie. I should say I slipped. But I can't. Not with that look in his eyes. And just like that, everything changes. Before we continue, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. The bistro fell silent after Marco spoke, the hum of conversation evaporating like mist. No one moved, no one breathed, and even the flickering neon outside seemed to dim. His hand dropped from my chin, but the weight of his gaze didn't. Somewhere behind me, Rosa whispered my name, quiet and fearful, but Marco's voice cut through her concern with a kind of soft finality that made everyone freeze. Upstairs, he said. Now. I tried to protest, the words trembling on my split lip, but they died beneath the authority in his tone. He wasn't yelling, he didn't need to. His command carried the weight of a man who didn't ask twice. One of his men appeared from the dining area, big, silent, and dressed in black. Marco didn't look at him when he said, "Get the medic here." 10 minutes. The man nodded and disappeared like smoke. I didn't move, rooted to the same floor I'd mopped every night for months. I'm fine, I said, the lie clumsy useless. I just need to work. Marco's eyes flicked to mine, unreadable and dark as the storm outside. You're done for tonight. He stepped closer, so close I could smell the faint trace of whiskey and cedar that clung to his clothes. You bleed in my place, you don't clock out, you get taken care of. Rosa tried again, her voice trembling. Marco, it's handled, he said, not even glancing at her. That was all it took. The kitchen door swung shut, muffling whatever else Rosa wanted to say. Marco gestured toward the staircase that led above the bistro. Go, he said quietly. I didn't want to. I didn't want his pity, his protection, his attention, but I went anyway. The apartment upstairs was nothing like the restaurant below. Warm light spilled across hardwood floors, the furniture sleek but comfortable, every piece chosen by someone who valued precision over extravagance. The scent of coffee and faint cigar smoke lingered in the air, too human to belong to someone as dangerous as Marco Marino. I stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, blood on my sleeve, and tried not to feel small. Marco followed me in, shedding his jacket like the weight of it didn't matter. He didn't look at me when he spoke. Sit down before you fall down. My legs obeyed even when my pride didn't. I sank onto the edge of the leather couch, wincing as my ribs protested. Marco moved to the bar cart, poured a glass of water, and handed it to me. His fingers brushed mine, brief, deliberate, and strangely grounding. Drink. The door opened again. A man in his 50s entered, carrying a black medical case and wearing a look of weary efficiency. Heard it was urgent, he said. Marco nodded toward me. She's hurt. Fix it. The medic didn't ask questions. Maybe he knew better. His hands were gentle but clinical as he inspected the bruises along my face, the split lip, the swelling near my eye. Nothing broken, he murmured. Just bruising. She's lucky. He cleaned the cut along my cheek with antiseptic, and I hissed at the sting. Marco's eyes flicked toward the sound, sharp and assessing. Be careful, he warned. The medic froze mid-motion, then nodded once and finished quickly. She'll need rest. Ice for the swelling. I'll leave painkillers. Marco handed him a folded envelope before he left. No words, no pleasantries. When the door closed, the room felt too quiet again. I could still smell alcohol wipes and adrenaline. You didn't have to call someone, I said softly. I've handled worse. Marco leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You shouldn't have to handle anything like that again. Something in his voice made me look up. He wasn't angry, not in the way I'd expected. His expression was still, carved from restraint, but there was something underneath it. A pulse of something darker. Who was it? He asked. What did they look like? I blinked, thrown. I didn't see much. 2 men, maybe 30, maybe older. They came out of the alley near the back entrance. He nodded once, like he was already 10 steps ahead of me. Did they say anything? I hesitated, memory flashing like lightning. They said it was a message. The air shifted around us. Marco straightened, his jaw tightening, and I realized too late that I'd triggered something. A message, he repeated. The words came out quieter, colder, dangerous in their calm. He turned away without another word, crossing to the shelf near the far wall. A hidden panel slid open under his hand, revealing a small monitor. He hit a few buttons, and footage flickered to life, grainy, black and white images from the alley behind the bistro. Cameras cover every entrance, he said absently, eyes locked on the screen. People forget that. I didn't breathe. There I was, on the screen, hood up, walking fast through the rain. 2 shapes emerged from the shadows. My stomach twisted. Marco fast-forwarded, jaw tightening with every frame. When one of them grabbed me, when the punch came, he froze the image. His hand clenched around the desk edge hard enough that I heard the wood creak. Whoever they are, he said, voice low, they were sent. I wanted to tell him to let it go. To stop looking. But I didn't. The truth was, I wanted someone to care that it happened. And Marco did, but in a way that scared me. He rewound the footage, zooming in on one man's face, a blur of shadow, but Marco seemed to recognize him. His tone dropped another octave. Vance Keller, he muttered. That idiot works collections for the Albanos. The name meant nothing to me, but it clearly did to him. He pulled out his phone, typing fast, then paused. I'm going to make this clear, he said, looking at me again. This isn't random. They wanted to prove something to me. He pocketed the phone, his gaze steady. But they didn't know they were touching someone under my roof. I don't want trouble, I said. You already have it, he replied simply. The words should have terrified me, but they didn't. Maybe because his calm felt like a shield instead of a threat. You work here. That makes you mine to protect, he added. The phrase hung in the air, heavy, dangerous, and yet inexplicably comforting. He stepped closer, stopping only when the distance between us felt charged. I need you to stay upstairs tonight, he said quietly. No arguments. Marco, you were attacked. In my territory. Do you understand what that means? His eyes were darker than the night outside. It means whoever sent them just declared war. The word war didn't sound like an exaggeration. It sounded like a promise. You don't have to do this, I whispered. He tilted his head, studying me. You think I'm doing this because I have to? He almost smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, Jennifer. I'm doing it because someone hurt you. And in my world, that doesn't go unanswered. The rain outside had turned violent, tapping hard against the windows. It filled the silence between us, steady and relentless. Marco turned back to the desk, dialing a number on his phone. "Franco," he said when someone answered. "Get everyone back to the office. No meetings tonight. I want Keller and anyone tied to him found before dawn." He listened for a moment, then hung up. "It'll be handled." I pressed my palms against my knees, trying to steady my breathing. "You're making this into something bigger than it is." Marco met my gaze. "Someone put their hands on you in my city," he said. "That's already bigger than you think." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried a quiet conviction that made the words feel immovable. He wasn't bluffing. He was promising. Minutes passed like hours. Marco poured another glass of water, then another for himself, though he didn't drink it. The tension in the room coiled tighter with every heartbeat. I wanted to ask why he cared so much, but something in his expression warned me not to. Finally, I said the only thing I could manage. "What happens now?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Now I make sure they never forget your face," he said. "And that no one ever touches what's mine again." The possessive edge in his words should have angered me, but instead, it made my chest ache with something I couldn't name. I looked away before he could read it in my expression. When he finally stood, the decision in his posture was absolute. "You'll stay here tonight," he said again, quieter this time. "The spare room's made up. Franco will bring a change of clothes and whatever else you need." I nodded, because arguing felt useless. He moved to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked street. "Get some rest. Things will look different in the morning." I wanted to believe that. But I could feel it. Whatever he was about to do, it wouldn't end with rest. Marco Marino didn't fix problems quietly. He erased them. I watched him from the couch, the soft glow of the city lighting his profile. He looked like a man carved from steel and shadow, unshakable and dangerously calm. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to live under someone's protection and fear it. I lay down on the couch when he left the room, exhaustion pulling at me, pain humming under my skin. The rain outside didn't stop. Somewhere below, the kitchen lights flicked off one by one. I thought about the alley, the voices, the fists. But more than that, I thought about Marco's face when he saw me, how something in him changed. Like a line had been crossed he didn't know existed until now. When I finally drifted towards sleep, faint sounds filtered up from below. The shuffle of footsteps, the low rumble of men's voices, the click of a gun being chambered. The city was awake, and so was he. Somewhere out there, someone was already running. They didn't know what they'd started. I closed my eyes, the sound of the rain blending with distant thunder, and whispered into the darkness, "Please don't kill anyone because of me." No one answered. But deep down, I already knew it was too late. By the time the night surrendered to dawn, Brooklyn's quiet was broken by sirens and silence in equal measure. No one could say exactly what happened, but everyone knew who was behind it. Marco didn't hide his message. He carved it into the city's bones. And as the first light crept through the blinds, he stood in the doorway of the apartment, watching me sleep, a storm still burning in his eyes. "They sent a message," he murmured, his voice low, dangerous, final. "Now they'll learn who they were talking to." I woke slowly, unsure of where I was at first. The ceiling above me wasn't the stained plaster of my apartment, but smooth, ivory-toned wood with delicate crown molding. The bed beneath me was too soft, the sheets too clean, the silence too absolute. Then the memory returned: Marco, the bistro, the alley, the medic's cold hands, the way he said "mine" like it was a vow no one else got to break. I sat up carefully, my ribs protesting the movement, and found two men standing just outside the open bedroom door, hands folded in front of them, armed and unblinking. They weren't there by coincidence. One of them looked vaguely familiar, tall, with a scar above his eyebrow, the kind of face you only remember if you know what to look for. The other was younger, broader, more impatient, like he was waiting for something to go wrong. I cleared my throat. "Are you guarding me?" I asked. The scarred one nodded, like the answer should have been obvious. I climbed out of bed, barefoot and cautious, my limbs stiff from sleeping too still. The younger guard held out a folded shirt and a clean pair of sweatpants, both neatly placed on a tray beside a steaming cup of coffee. "From Mr. Marino," he said. I took them with slow hands, unnerved by the formality, the structure of this world I had stepped into by accident or maybe fate. He said you'd try to leave, the younger man added, not unkindly. Said to tell you not to bother. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. The swelling in my eye had gone down a little, but the bruises were worse, deeper now, turning shades of maroon and yellow that looked unnatural on human skin. The cut on my lip had started to scab. I looked like someone who'd lost a fight, and I had. But the girl in the mirror didn't look scared. She looked angry, and that scared me more. The flashback hit mid-rinse, water scalding across my shoulders as the memory tunneled in without warning. I was 17 again, hiding behind a gas station dumpster at 1 a.m., knees scraped raw from falling. My foster mother's boyfriend had tried to discipline me, his breath thick with vodka and entitlement, and I had run until my lungs gave out. I remember how the police looked through me when I flagged them down. I remember how they wrote it off as domestic tension and told me to get back home. That was the night I decided no one would ever have to rescue me again. I dressed slowly, careful of the bruises, and stepped out of the room. The two men fell into step beside me without a word, flanking me like I was someone important or dangerous. I hated how natural it felt. I found Marco in the living room, standing by the window with a phone pressed to his ear and a mug in his hand. He turned when he heard me, his eyes scanning my face like a scan for fractures. "Good," he said, nodding at the guards. "You didn't let her leave." I narrowed my eyes. I wasn't planning on running. His gaze didn't shift. People say that right before they run. I folded my arms over my chest, ignoring the ache it caused. This is overkill. I'm a waitress, not a senator. Marco ended the call and set his phone down gently on the windowsill. "You're not just a waitress," he said. "Not anymore." I hated how easily those words tangled in my chest, how much they felt like something else entirely. "You think one beating suddenly makes me important?" I asked. He didn't answer, not with words. He gestured for me to follow him into the adjacent study, where a laptop was open on the desk and 3 men waited, men in dark suits, with earpieces and knives in their eyes. Marco didn't introduce them. "Last night," he said, pointing to the screen, "we traced 2 vehicles that pulled into the alley just before your attack. One registered to a front company tied to the Albanos." He turned to me. "You were never the target." The message was. I leaned forward, heart thudding. "What message?" "That I can't protect my own," Marco replied, voice razor sharp. "That they can get close to what's mine and walk away untouched." The room went still. I felt my stomach drop. "But I'm not yours," I said, almost a whisper. He stepped closer, eyes hard. "You saved my life once. Did you think I forgot that?" I blinked. "What?" Marco didn't look away. "Years ago. Outside a club on East 76th. I was bleeding out after a hit gone wrong. Someone called an ambulance and vanished. That someone was you, wasn't it?" The world stopped turning for a second. The memory rushed back in jagged flashes, a man in a black shirt, slumped against the brick wall, blood soaking his collar. I'd been walking home from a night shift at the diner, and I'd nearly kept going. But something in his eyes, terrified, human, had made me stop. I dialed 911, stayed until the sirens came, and disappeared before the flashing lights caught my name. I looked at him now, this dangerous man with an empire and a vendetta, and felt like I was seeing him for the first time. "You knew," I said, breathless. "You knew it was me?" "Not right away," he said. "But eventually." "You disappeared so fast, I thought maybe I imagined you. But your face, your voice." I remembered. I backed up, overwhelmed. "Why didn't you say something before?" "Because I thought I'd never see you again," he said simply. "Then I walked into Rena's one night, and there you were. Quiet. Invisible. Like a ghost who didn't know she was haunting me." I didn't know what to say. The walls of my world felt thinner than they'd been just moments ago. "So what now?" I asked. "You repay me by turning Brooklyn into a battlefield?" "I repay you," Marco said, voice low, "by making sure no one ever touches you again without losing everything they own." He reached for his phone and muttered something into the mic, "Lock the district. Everyone who knows anything, bring them in." The guards nodded and left, boots heavy against the floor. The silence they left behind was heavier. You're overreacting, I whispered, still dizzy with the weight of his confession. No, Marco said. You're underestimating how far I'll go for someone I owe. We stood there, the air thick between us. I was still the girl who'd disappeared before the sirens, and he was the man who didn't forget. But now the game had changed. Because someone had dragged me into the open. And Marco Marino didn't let debts go unpaid. Have you ever made a small, selfless choice that unknowingly changed someone else's life forever? Drop your answer in the comments, or hit subscribe to see what Marco does next when someone crosses his line. The rain had stopped by morning, but the city outside Marco's apartment felt hushed, as though it knew better than to disturb him. The quiet was heavier than silence. It had weight, like a warning. I sat by the window, wrapped in a borrowed sweatshirt that smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, and tried not to think about what was happening beyond the glass. The bruise on my cheek throbbed with every heartbeat, a reminder of what had been taken from me, and what Marco intended to take back. Somewhere below, men were moving, cars idling, radios crackling, but up here, everything felt frozen in place. When Marco appeared in the doorway, he didn't look like the man I'd seen last night. His jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, hair still damp from a shower. The edges of his control were softer in the daylight, though his eyes stayed dark, unreadable. He carried 2 mugs of tea and set one on the table beside me without a word. You drink coffee like you're trying to survive it, he said quietly. Try this instead. Chamomile. I blinked, startled by the simplicity of it. You made tea. He gave the faintest ghost of a smile. Franco says I'm bad at apologies. This is the best I can do. I stared at the rising steam, unsure how to respond. His hand brushed mine as he handed over the mug, the warmth seeping through my skin faster than the tea ever could. It was a small thing, but in this world of power and violence, it felt enormous. He sat across from me, elbows resting on his knees, watching me like a man waiting for something he couldn't ask out loud. You remember anything else about that night? He asked. I took a sip of tea, the taste grounding me. Bits and pieces. There was a club, flashing lights, people screaming. You were on the ground. I didn't think you'd make it. Marco's jaw flexed, his gaze flicking toward the window before settling back on me. I wasn't supposed to. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The memory hung there between us, heavy with everything unspoken. I remembered kneeling beside him, pressing my hands to a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, the sirens echoing like a countdown. He grabbed my wrist back then, his grip weak, trembling, and whispered something I couldn't understand before slipping under. I hadn't told anyone about that night since. Not until now. I didn't know who you were, I said softly. I just couldn't leave you there. Marco nodded, eyes steady. And that's exactly why I can't leave you now. There was no charm in his tone, no manipulation, just fact. He leaned back, folding his arms, and the tension in the room shifted from defensive to something else entirely. Something that made my pulse stutter. You shouldn't be here, I said, breaking the silence. You've got an empire to run or whatever it is you do. His brow lifted, amused. Whatever it is I do. You know what I mean. I tried not to smile, but it slipped out anyway. You're dangerous, Marco. People whisper your name like it's a threat. He tilted his head. And yet you're sitting here drinking my tea. The line between fear and fascination blurred. I didn't know what to make of it, this strange safety I felt in the presence of a man everyone else feared. He studied me like I was the only real thing in a room built on ghosts. You keep calling me dangerous, he said, voice lower now, but the truth is, you're the only honest thing left in my world. I looked away, my throat tight. That's not true. Isn't it? He stood and walked to the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. Men lie for power. They kill for money. They promise loyalty they don't mean. You didn't ask for anything, you just acted. That night, you didn't care who I was. You saw a man bleeding and you helped. He turned back toward me. You saved me first, Jennifer. You started this. His words landed somewhere deep, shaking loose a truth I hadn't wanted to see. I set the mug down before I dropped it. I didn't do it for you, I whispered. I did it because no one else would. Exactly, he said. The quiet between us thickened, charged and fragile. Outside, The light shifted, soft gold spilling through the blinds, catching the edges of his face like he was carved from the same material as the city he ruled. He moved closer, but not enough to touch. Close enough that I could feel his breath against my skin. There was a knock at the door, sharp and efficient. Marco stepped back instantly, composure sliding back into place like armor. "Come in," he said. Franco entered, his presence cutting through the tension like cold air. "It's spreading," he said simply. "Word on the street is that someone put hands on your girl. Half the city's gone quiet." Marco's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Good. Let them stay quiet." Franco hesitated. "The Albano family sent word. They're requesting a sit-down." Marco gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "They can wait." He gestured toward the door, and Franco understood the dismissal. Before he left, though, his gaze flicked toward me, assessing, curious. "You sure about this, boss?" "I've never been more sure about anything," Marco said. When we were alone again, I couldn't stop staring at him. "Your girl," I repeated, tone sharper than I meant. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried too much history to be casual. "That's how they'll talk about you. It keeps you safe." "By labeling me?" "By warning them," he corrected. "No one touches what's under my protection." The word protection sat uneasily in my chest. It wasn't possession, not exactly, but it carried weight I wasn't ready to name. "You can't fight everyone, Marco," I said. "Watch me," he replied, and it didn't sound like bravado. It sounded like a promise carved in stone. "You don't understand," I tried again. "This isn't your fault." "It is now," he said quietly. He reached out then, slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His hand brushed my jaw, fingertips tracing the edge of the fading bruise. His touch was light, careful, reverent. "I should have found you sooner," he murmured. "You shouldn't have to live like you're waiting for someone to hurt you again." I wanted to tell him that life doesn't work like that some people are just built to survive, not to be saved. But the words wouldn't come. We stayed like that longer than we should have. His hand dropped, and the distance between us felt heavier than before. "You don't owe me anything," I said finally. "I owe you my life," he countered. "And what does that make me? A debt to collect?" "No," he said. "It makes you the only thing I didn't destroy by accident." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a low growl that matched the rhythm of his words. I wanted to be angry with him for dragging me into his world, for making promises I didn't ask for, but instead I felt something else. Something warm and unsteady blooming beneath my ribs. It terrified me more than the alley ever had, because for the first time, I wanted to believe him. By the time evening fell, Marco was still at the window, phone in hand, issuing orders I couldn't hear. I sat nearby, pretending to read, though my eyes never left him. There was a gentleness in his stillness, like he was holding the chaos at bay by sheer will. "You should rest," he said without looking up. "You've had enough war for one lifetime." "And you?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "War's all I've ever known." He turned then, closing the distance between us. The air shifted again, tighter, charged. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said. I looked up, meeting his gaze. "I'm not afraid," I lied. His eyes softened. "Good. Because I'm not going to stop protecting you, no matter what it costs." His words hung between us, heavy as a vow. I wanted to tell him that protection wasn't love, that vengeance wasn't safety, but when he looked at me, I forgot how to breathe. The city outside had gone completely still, holding its breath. Somewhere out there, rumors were spreading, alliances cracking, men whispering in back rooms about Marco Marino's weakness. They didn't know he'd never been stronger. When he finally walked me to the guest room, I hesitated at the doorway. "Marco," I said quietly. He turned, waiting. "If this gets worse, if people come after you because of me, then they'll learn what it means to touch something sacred," he interrupted, his tone calm but unyielding. "You saved me first, Jennifer. I'm just returning the favor." I lay awake long after he left, staring at the ceiling while the city pulsed quietly beyond the walls. Somewhere deep down, I knew everything had changed. Not just the way he looked at me, but the way I looked at myself. I wasn't invisible anymore, and for the first time in years, that didn't terrify me. It thrilled me. The air in the apartment felt different the next morning, thicker, tense, like it had learned how to hold a grudge. I moved quietly, aware of every creak in the floorboards, as if the walls themselves were watching. The guards outside my room were gone, probably reassigned to somewhere more important, but their absence didn't feel like freedom. It felt like space, a wide open stretch of consequence waiting to catch up to me. I didn't belong here, wrapped in luxury and guarded like a secret. Marco had been kind, too kind. He brought tea instead of threats, stitched warmth into silence like a man who'd forgotten how to be cold. But kindness like his came at a cost, one I didn't want him paying. Because no matter how hard I tried to deny it, I'd become something in his world. Not just a waitress. Not just a memory. A vulnerability. So I packed. Quietly. Deliberately. My clothes still smelled like the bistro and bleach and fear. I shoved them into a canvas duffel, heart pounding with each item folded. I didn't leave a note. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for the armed guards and the trauma processing. Sorry I became a liability. I slipped down the hallway, socks muffling my steps, pulse ticking in my ears like a countdown. The back staircase spiraled down toward the kitchen, empty this early, the world outside still wrapped in dawnlight. I knew the security codes. I'd watched Marco enter them the night he brought me here, eyes darting over his shoulder, never imagining I'd remember. But I remembered everything now. It's what trauma does, it teaches you to pay attention. I was 5 steps from the exit when I saw him. Leaning against the alley doorway, hands in his pockets like he'd been waiting for hours. Marco didn't flinch. Didn't speak right away. He just looked at me like I'd betrayed something sacred. "Where were you going?" he asked, voice low. Not angry. Just tired. I froze. "Home," I said, though it didn't feel like one anymore. I didn't want to cause more problems. He stepped forward slowly, as if I might bolt. "You think leaving solves this?" "I think staying makes it worse," I shot back. "People are going to come after you because of me." Marco exhaled like he'd been holding the breath for years. "You don't get to walk away," he said. "Not after someone put their hands on you in my city. Especially not you." His words weren't coated in sweetness. They were sharp, final, like a door slamming shut behind me. "You didn't ask for this," I whispered. "No," he agreed. "But I'll answer for it anyway." I didn't move. Couldn't. Not when he looked at me like that, like I was the only thing anchoring him to this side of human. "Go upstairs," he said, his voice softer now. "Finish your tea. I'll come back when it's done." "When what's done?" I asked, but he was already turning toward the shadows, coat whipping behind him like a closing curtain. Back in the apartment, the tea was still warm. I sat by the window, watching the alley, wondering how many footsteps it took to start a war. Across the city, Marco's men were already moving. Franco drove point, fast, lethal, and unapologetic. The first hit landed at midnight. An Albano stash house in Red Hook burned before the crew inside could unlock the basement. Gunshots cracked through the quiet like lightning through glass. No police reports came. No headlines. But the underworld noticed. Every crew in Brooklyn woke up knowing something had changed. The second location fell an hour later, a warehouse near the docks that served as a ghost front for cash laundering. 3 men never made it out. The survivors were left tied to a fence post, stripped of weapons and warnings alike. On their chests, duct taped in Marco's hand, "Touch her again and you won't wake up next time." By 3 a.m., the city had bled enough. The third raid happened without a word. No shots. Just shadows. When the doors opened at dawn, the stash was gone, the crew vanished, the Albano insignia tagged over with black spray paint. Just 2 words. "She's mine." Back in the apartment, the quiet felt heavier than before. I sat cross-legged on the couch, tea long gone, staring at the blank TV screen like it might show me the things I wasn't allowed to see. Marco returned just after 6. His coat was damp from the fog, his knuckles scraped. He dropped his phone on the table and looked at me like he wasn't sure if I'd still be here. "You stayed." I nodded, unable to speak. He crossed to the kitchen, poured himself a drink, something dark, not tea. His shoulders sagged, exhaustion curling through every line of him like smoke. I didn't ask what he'd done. I didn't need to. He poured a second glass and handed it to me without a word. We sat in silence for a while, just breathing, just being. And then, finally, I whispered, "How bad is it?" He took a long sip before answering. "Bad enough that no one will touch you again. And the fallout? They'll scream, threaten, lie low, but they won't move. Not now." Something in me cracked then. The weight of being seen, of being defended, of mattering, it pressed so hard against the parts of me that had stayed invisible for years. "I never asked for this," I said. "I never wanted to be the reason people bled." Marco didn't flinch. "You're not the reason. They are." I believed him. Not because it made everything right, but because for once, someone was willing to make it matter. He set his glass down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You don't get to walk away anymore, Jennifer. Not because I won't let you, but because this," he gestured between us, the room, the air heavy with fire and silence, "this isn't going anywhere." I met his eyes. "What happens next?" His voice was quiet. "Now, they wait. And we watch." "And after that?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Have you ever wanted to walk away from something that scared you only to find out it meant more to someone else than you thought? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to see what happens when love and war collide in Brooklyn, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The elevator opened with a soft chime that didn't match the tension in my chest. This wasn't just another floor of some fortress Marco controlled. This was his personal penthouse. The one no one talked about, but everyone knew existed. I stepped in first, duffel slung over my shoulder, the faint scent of fresh paint and cedar brushing past me. Marco followed silently, keying in a code only he knew, and the doors closed behind us like a secret locking itself away. The space was quieter than I expected. No guards. No echoes of conversation. Just warmth and wood and skyline. Sunlight spilled across hardwood floors, and a wall of windows opened up to Brooklyn's heartbeat, cars, cranes, and chaos, all tamed by distance. For the first time, I saw a part of Marco untouched by reputation. He set my bag down by the hallway, then slipped off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "You hungry?" he asked, already moving toward the open kitchen. "I can make eggs. Maybe French toast." I blinked at him, confused. "You cook?" He pulled out a pan, glanced back with a half smile. "I don't just break things, Jennifer. Sometimes I feed people too." The rhythm of the morning unfolded like something unfamiliar but welcome. He cooked like he ran the city, precise, efficient, unbothered by chaos. I sat on a bar stool and watched him pour batter, flip toast, slide eggs onto warm plates without asking how I liked them. He already knew. Somewhere in the quiet, I forgot I was supposed to be scared. We ate in silence, but it wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of us knew how to say out loud. Every glance was a test. Every brush of fingers across the counter a question. After breakfast, Marco disappeared down the hall while I wandered into the living room, where framed photos lined the bookshelves. They weren't what I expected. A woman in her 20s with Marco's eyes and smile, his sister, maybe. An older man with a stoic face and war in his bones, definitely his father. Then one picture of Marco as a boy, no older than 10, in a crisp white shirt, standing next to a man in a suit whose face was blurred by age and shadow. He looked proud, almost innocent. It didn't make sense. Marco found me there, his voice quiet. "That's my uncle. He raised me after my father died." I turned, startled. "You were a kid." He nodded. "I became someone else after that. We all do." I didn't ask what happened. I didn't have to. His silence said more than a confession ever could. The day passed in fragments. I dozed on the couch while Marco took calls in the other room. He lowered his voice every time I stirred. Brought me tea without asking. Covered me with a blanket when I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep. No one had taken care of me in years, not like that. By evening, the skyline burned gold and violet. Marco stood on the rooftop terrace, his back to me, watching the sun surrender to the city. I stepped out beside him, wind brushing my face, carrying the scent of rain on the horizon. "You always come up here?" I asked. He nodded. "When I need to remember what I'm protecting." I leaned against the railing, letting the city hum beneath my skin. You think you're protecting me? I know I am. He looked at me then, not like a man calculating risk, but like a man bracing for impact. Loving me makes you a target, Jennifer. His voice was a warning, soft and heavy. But I can't stop. My breath caught. Not from fear. Not even surprise. But from the weight of being seen, truly seen, by a man who never let anyone in. I'm not asking you to stop, I whispered. He stepped closer, close enough that the space between us could have broken into something dangerous or something holy. You should, he said. You should run. But I didn't. I leaned in. He didn't touch me at first. Just waited. Watching. Wanting. And when I didn't pull back, he bent his head slowly, deliberately, like he knew he'd never get another chance. The kiss was quiet. No fireworks. No music. Just breath and heartbeat and fingers curling into fabric. His hand found my jaw, steady and sure, like he was anchoring us both to something real. His lips were soft, careful, like a promise sealed in skin. When we broke apart, we didn't speak. There was nothing left to explain. Everything we weren't ready to say had already been said. I pressed my forehead to his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart beneath layers of danger and devotion. His arms wrapped around me, and for the first time, I didn't feel like something he was protecting. I felt like something he chose. The wind picked up. Brooklyn buzzed below us, oblivious to the war that had been paused, if only for a moment. Marco kissed the top of my head, then whispered, "If anything happens to you because of me, it won't," I said before he could finish. "You won't let it." He nodded against my hair, and I could feel the tension bleeding out of his body inch by inch. "You shouldn't be the one calming me down," he said. "You're the one who got hurt." "I'm the one who stayed," I corrected. He pulled back to look at me, his expression unreadable. "You think you can live in this world with me?" "I think I already am." He laughed then, not loud, but real. "You're impossible." "So are you," I said. "Guess we're even." The kiss that followed was different, deeper, unguarded, a little reckless. Like we both knew this moment wouldn't last forever, but we were going to take it anyway. When we finally came back down from the rooftop, the world felt different. Not safer. Just changed. Marco poured us each a drink, something strong, and we sat on the couch like it was a normal evening. I tucked my feet under me. He leaned back, arms stretched along the cushion, but his fingers brushed mine every few minutes like he couldn't help it. We didn't talk about the crews watching us, or the power plays waiting in shadows, or what it would mean when the next challenge came. We just stayed in that room, two people sitting at the edge of something that felt like danger and comfort all at once. And I knew then, Marco wasn't going to protect me like glass. He was going to protect me like fire. The night was too still, the kind of stillness that warned you to keep your head down and your voice quiet. Rain had started again, light, constant, like the city was trying to wash off something it couldn't name. I sat by the window in Marco's penthouse, the lights dim, the world outside a shadow play of red and gold. He hadn't said where he was going, but I knew. The call from Franco had come in short, clipped sentences. No details. Just an address. Just an order. Marco had kissed me before he left, quick, firm, final. Not goodbye. Just in case. "Lock the door," he'd said. "Don't open it unless it's me." And then he was gone, swallowed by the elevator and the kind of silence that always came before something broke. I knew better than to follow. But I also knew enough not to be afraid of what silence like that meant. Franco was already waiting when Marco arrived. The warehouse loomed near the docks, rusting at the edges, empty on the surface. But inside, the air buzzed with threat. For men flanked the door, faces hard, hands heavy with weapons that wouldn't fire unless Marco gave the nod. "He's inside," Franco said. Tried to talk tough. Didn't last long. Marco didn't answer. He just walked through the open metal door, footsteps echoing like hammers on old stone. Inside, Victor Razek sat tied to a metal chair, blood on his shirt, defiance in his eyes. Two more of his men lay unconscious nearby, proof that loyalty only got you so far. The air smelled of oil, damp wood, and something else, something metallic and final. Victor lifted his chin when Marco approached, trying to muster what little pride he had left. "You overreacted," he said, mouth split from someone's fist. "It was just a scare tactic." Marco stopped in front of him, hands in the pockets of his coat. "Why her?" he asked. "Quiet. Simple. Deadly." Victor laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "Didn't know she meant anything." "Then why target the alley behind my bistro?" Marco's voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. Why send a message through someone who had nothing to do with your business?" He leaned in slightly, gaze sharp as glass. "You don't pick random girls unless you know they matter." Victor said nothing. Marco waited. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "Answer me," Marco said again. The threat curled beneath his calm like a knife beneath velvet. Victor blinked, sweat beading at his brow. "She's leverage," he finally muttered. "You've been soft. Word is, she changed you." "We needed proof." Marco didn't move. "So you followed her. Put hands on her. Left her bleeding in an alley because you thought I'd gotten soft." He straightened slowly, adjusting the cuff of his shirt like the moment was already over. "That was your mistake, Victor." His voice was steel now. "You thought love made me weak. But all it did was give me something to fight for." Franco stepped forward without a word, but Marco raised one hand. "Not yet." He circled Victor's chair once, then stopped behind him. "You didn't just attack a civilian. You declared war. And I don't take that lightly." Victor tensed, shoulders drawn tight. "It wasn't personal. You made it personal the second you chose her," Marco interrupted. The lights above flickered as thunder rolled outside. It was the kind of night that didn't forget what happened beneath it. "No one's going to mourn you, Victor," Marco said. "Your crew? Already scattered. Your family? Half of them were on my payroll anyway. You lost before you even touched her." He paused. "But I still need to make this mean something." Franco nodded. Two of Marco's men moved forward, pulling Victor upright. He didn't fight. Not because he'd accepted death, but because in that moment, he understood what it meant to face a man like Marco Marino. No speeches. No drama. Just consequence. Sharp. Swift. Absolute. Victor didn't scream. Whatever happened next was clean. Efficient. By the time it was done, Marco was already walking toward the exit, rain hitting his coat in sheets. 3 more names were handed to Franco before they made it to the car. "No mistakes," Marco said. "No witnesses." Franco just nodded. He understood. This wasn't revenge. It was message delivery. Back at the penthouse, I couldn't sleep. I curled on the couch in one of Marco's shirts, phone clutched in my hand, waiting for a text I knew wouldn't come. He never updated me. Never explained. But I felt the shift in the city like pressure against my ribs. Sirens slowed. Streets emptied. Something had changed. When the door finally opened, it was almost 5 a.m. Marco stepped inside, rainwater darkening the cuffs of his sleeves, hair tousled from wind. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, watching me like he wasn't sure if I'd stayed. "It's done," he said quietly. I nodded. All of it. Most of it. He took off his coat, tossed it over the armchair. 3 more are running. But not far. I stood and walked to him slowly. "Are you okay?" His eyes met mine, tired but steady. "I should be asking you that." We sat together in the stillness, the only sound the slow, steady drip of water from his coat to the hardwood floor. I reached for his hand. He let me. His knuckles were bruised, his pulse calm. "Did it help?" I asked. "Killing him?" Marco exhaled. "No. But it stopped the bleeding." Dawn was breaking, soft and gray, casting long shadows across the room. Marco stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the city that now knew better. "They all know now," he said. "Touch her, and there's no coming back." He turned toward me. "You're not just a weakness, Jennifer. You're a reckoning." And somewhere, deep in the silence that followed, I believed him. The headlines didn't name names, but they didn't have to. 3 warehouses raided in coordinated overnight strike. Unconfirmed reports of missing men tied to Albano operation. Brooklyn crime family sends a message loud and clear. I sat at Marco's breakfast table, scrolling through article after article while my untouched tea cooled beside me. They didn't mention me, but I could feel myself between every line. The girl behind the violence. The ghost in the alley who became the storm. Marco came in from the terrace, shirt sleeves rolled, knuckles still bruised from whatever version of justice he'd carved into the night. He moved like a man who had no regrets, only momentum. "You're up early," he said, nodding to the phone in my hand. "Reading the city's version of our story?" I looked up. Was it all for me? The question came out softer than I intended. He didn't blink. Yes. No apology. No hesitation. He crossed to me, pulled out a chair, and sat close enough that our knees brushed. "Because you matter, Jennifer." And somehow, that hurt more than it healed. I'd never mattered like this before. Never enough to make the world bleed. "I didn't ask for any of this," I said. He nodded. "You didn't have to." I could feel the weight of him watching me, careful, patient, like he was bracing for the part where I finally walked away. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I closed the news app and took his hand in mine. "If I'm going to matter," I whispered, "then I want to understand what that means." Later that night, after dinner and wine and too many silent looks across the kitchen counter, Marco led me upstairs. No words. Just his hand in mine, steady and warm, anchoring me to something that scared me and soothed me in the same breath. The penthouse was quiet except for the hum of city life beneath the glass. It all felt fragile. Real. Like we'd reached the edge of something we couldn't undo. He kissed me like it was the first and last time, slow, deliberate, reverent. Not like a man who owned anything. Like a man who couldn't believe what he'd been given. His hands were careful as they touched the bruises still fading along my ribs, tracing the scars like they were secrets. I didn't flinch. I let him see all of it. When it was over, we stayed tangled in silence, skin on skin, the city painting shadows across our bodies. I lay with my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, calm, steady, human. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about danger or debts or headlines. I was thinking about him. About us. About how we'd somehow stitched something warm and breathing out of a night that started in blood. "I don't want to be the reason you get hurt," I said. His fingers traced slow circles across my back. "You're not. Franco thinks I am." Marco stiffened under me, just for a second. "You heard that." I wasn't trying to, I admitted. I just heard. It had been earlier that day, after breakfast, while Marco took a call in the next room, and I wandered too close to the cracked door. Franco's voice, low and clipped. "She's your weakness, Marco. If they can't reach you, they'll reach her." I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. The words rooted into my chest like thorns. Marco sat up, pulling me gently with him until we were eye to eye. "He's not wrong," he said. "But I'm not going to live like that." "Like what?" "Like love is something that needs hiding. Like I have to choose between you and keeping control." His hand cupped my jaw. "I've chosen already." I wanted to believe him. I did. But Franco's words had cracked something. Weakness. Leverage. Target. I'd spent so long trying not to be anyone's anything. And now I was someone's everything, and the weight of that felt both holy and terrifying. "Being with you means risk," I said. "It means always watching over my shoulder." "It means never being alone again," Marco said, voice firm. "It means someone standing between you and the people who want to see you broken. Every damn time." His words weren't flowery. They were iron. And I didn't doubt them for a second. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "Then no more hiding." A pause. "If they want to know who I am to you, let them know." His smile was small and sharp, the kind of smile that preceded revolutions. "They already know," he murmured. "Now we just make sure they never forget." The next morning, Marco took me with him to a meeting. Not hidden in the back. Not whispered about. Beside him. His hand on the small of my back. His name on every tongue that dared to look at me too long. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't safe. But it was clear. We walked into a downtown restaurant where kings of the underworld played pretend in three-piece suits and overpriced scotch. Franco trailed behind us, his expression unreadable. A dozen pairs of eyes tracked me across the floor. Marco didn't flinch. "You all know who she is," he said. "You all know what happened." He sat down. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. No one argued. No one dared. That night, as we stood on the rooftop again, watching the skyline burn into dusk, I reached for his hand. "You sure about this?" I asked. "You just painted a target on both of us." Marco squeezed my fingers gently. "Then we face it together." And in that moment, I believed we could. Not because we were fearless, but because we weren't pretending anymore. Would you choose to love someone knowing it could make you a target, or would you walk away before the world noticed? Tell us in the comments. And if you're ready to see what loyalty looks like when the stakes keep rising, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I used to be good at disappearing. Back when I was a waitress, before blood and glass and whispered names in back rooms, I moved through life like a ghost. I learned to make myself small, quiet, harmless. That's how you survive when the world sees you as either weak or in the way. But now, for the first time in my life, I was done surviving quietly. I stood in front of the mirror in Marco's penthouse, smoothing the fabric of the midnight blue dress Rosa had helped me pick out. It clung just enough to feel dangerous, but not enough to feel like armor. The neckline dipped slightly, just enough to draw eyes, but tonight, I wasn't dressing for attention. I was dressing like a woman who had nothing left to hide. Behind me, Marco adjusted his cufflinks, watching me through the reflection. "You ready?" he asked, voice calm but edged with pride. I met his gaze in the mirror and nodded. "Let them look," I said. "Let them know." He crossed the room, stopped behind me, and placed one hand on my waist. "They'll stare because they're afraid," he murmured against my ear. "Not of you, of what you mean to me." We arrived at the event fashionably late and deliberately together. The venue was a renovated gallery, white marble floors, steel fixtures, curated art installations. But the real show was the crowd. The city's underground elite had all come dressed in polished smiles and silent weapons. And every head turned when Marco walked in with his arm wrapped around my waist. He didn't whisper. He didn't hide me. He introduced me. "This is Jennifer," he said to each man who dared to reach for his hand. "She's with me." They all nodded. Some out of respect, some out of fear. But none questioned it. I wasn't just decoration on his arm. I was a declaration. The flash of cameras didn't faze him. I felt their attention settle on my bare shoulders, the curve of my spine, the press of Marco's hand against the small of my back. This wasn't about vanity. This was visibility, the kind that rewrites a reputation. "They're watching," I said beneath my breath. Marco smiled slightly. "Good. Now they know. A beat. You're mine. And I don't share what I protect." But that night, I realized something else. I wasn't just his. Later that week, I asked to sit in on the accounts meeting. Marco didn't blink. He just pulled out a chair. "If you're in, you're all the way in," he said. "No half shadows." And I nodded, because I wasn't afraid of shadows anymore. I'd walked through enough of them to know where the light was kept. I started small, balancing the books, double-checking deposits, cross-referencing fund distributions from the front businesses to the real ones. Marco had people who could do it, sure. But I had something they didn't: perspective. I saw the cracks others ignored. And soon, the crew noticed. Franco was the first to say it out loud. "She's good," he said one morning after a warehouse audit I'd flagged revealed a missing 20 grand. "Too good." Marco grinned over his coffee. "That's why she's staying." The others stopped looking at me like I was porcelain. They started looking at me like I was bulletproof. Then came the community outreach work. At first, I thought it was a front. Charity galas. Fundraisers. Donations to local shelters and after-school programs. But Marco meant it. "We don't just run this city," he said. "We build it. Quietly. From underneath." And when I showed him a more efficient way to funnel resources through clean channels, he didn't question it, he implemented it. Soon, people started coming to me directly. Luca asked me to help restructure his payroll system. Maria from the florist shop asked if I could organize the next event. Even Franco, who once treated me like a ticking bomb, began stopping by with reports for me to review. I wasn't just Marco's girl anymore. I was becoming something else. One afternoon, as I sat in the study flipping through a list of new vendors for an upcoming supply chain shift, Marco stepped inside with that quiet authority that always made my pulse flicker. "You've changed things," he said. I looked up. "That a problem?" "No," he said, walking over and brushing his thumb across my cheek. "That's what scares me." We stood there in the soft glow of afternoon light, and I realized what he meant. Not fear of me, but fear of what I'd come to mean. I wasn't an outsider anymore. I wasn't just a memory in his bloodstream or a target in an alley. I was inside now. And that meant if something shattered, it wouldn't just break him. It would break us. But I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I closed the folder in my lap and rose to face him. "I don't want to be invisible anymore," I said. "Not to you. Not to them. Not to the city." Marco didn't answer with words. He answered with a kiss. It was slower than the first. Deeper. Weightier. The kind of kiss that anchored things' hearts, lives, futures. When we parted, he looked at me like I was something sacred. "You were never invisible to me," he said. "You were just waiting to be seen." 6 weeks. That's how long it took for my body to forget what pain felt like. The bruises had faded to memories, my ribs no longer ached with each breath, and the scar on my cheek had softened into something pale and quiet. But the real healing, the kind that sits behind your ribs and under your skin, took something else entirely. It took silence and trust and time measured not by days, but by how many times Marco kissed me without fear in his eyes. The city had calmed, too, not peaceful, but still, like the ground had finally stopped shaking. Marco's enemies had learned. Those who hadn't disappeared learned to smile with their teeth hidden and their hands clearly visible. No one had touched me. No one had dared. His name was no longer just a name. It had become a boundary line. And I had become the one thing he drew that line around without apology. It was a Sunday morning when I woke to the smell of coffee and something sweeter. The penthouse was wrapped in early light, golden and lazy. I stretched, ribs humming with remembered pain, but no longer protesting. From the terrace, I heard the soft clink of dishes and the low murmur of music. When I stepped outside, Marco was already waiting. He'd set up breakfast, fruit, toast, eggs, everything arranged with precision on a glass table that overlooked the skyline. He poured my coffee without asking, the exact way I liked it. "You're early," I said, pulling the robe tighter around my waist. "You're worth waking up for," he replied, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. I smiled and took the seat beside him. We ate slowly, the kind of quiet between us that didn't ask for conversation. The city below was beginning to stir, but up here, it still felt like ours. He buttered my toast without asking, passed me the fruit bowl like we'd been doing this for years. Maybe we had in some other life. Or maybe we just decided this one would be different. When the sun had risen high enough to paint the glass buildings in shades of gold, Marco leaned back in his chair and looked at me differently. There was something soft in his eyes, but it was edged with something harder, something unspoken. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Everything that happened because of me?" The question didn't surprise me. It had been hovering between us for weeks, even if neither of us had said it out loud. I looked down at the scar that curved just below my cheekbone. I touched it, not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. Then I reached for his hand. "No," I said. "The attack brought me here. The danger made you see me. But the choice to stay? That's mine." His eyes darkened, not with threat, but with something that looked a lot like reverence. He leaned forward, brushed his lips across the scar so gently I barely felt it. "I'd burn this city again," he whispered, "if it meant you breathing easy." My throat tightened. There was something in his voice raw, real, dangerous not because of violence, but because of love. A kind of love that rewrites rules. That makes war just another language for protection. I pulled him closer. "You don't have to burn anything anymore," I said. "You just have to stay." He didn't answer with words. He just kissed me soft, steady, slow. Like it wasn't an ending, but the only beginning that ever mattered. We sat there for a long time, watching the sun climb higher, watching the city unfold beneath us. Below, people rushed and argued and chased whatever power they thought would save them. Up here, we had already found ours. Not in violence. Not even in vengeance. But in the choice to love each other anyway. The city had taken so much from both of us. But it had also given us something we never saw coming. A moment. A name. A kiss in an alley that started a war. And a rooftop where peace finally landed. I don't want to disappear again, I said quietly. You never did, Marco replied. You were just waiting for the right moment to be seen. He wasn't wrong. I used to survive in silence. Now, I stood in the light with a man who had torn the city apart to make sure I was whole. And I wasn't going to run from that. Not now. Not ever. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.